Hey there, and welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show, where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams. I am Casey Watts, school impact strategist and the host of this show. Now, if you are here, then you inevitably are an instructional leader who wants to make change happen, even when change seems impossible. And you can do that if you have cohesive, vision-driven teams that have done clarity work. They know exactly where they're headed and how they're going to get there. These teams have done identity work, and they've built their self and social awareness skills. And they have done collaboration work, and they know how to move beyond faux collaboration to get to true collaboration where change happens and where people get on board. I'm so excited to bring to you conversations that help you to do exactly that. The work that needs to be done to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's conversation. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 72. We are talking about how schools are horribly outdated and what we can do about transforming learning environments. And I am joined by Dr. Peter Dry. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Casey Watts. It is wonderful to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in. And I want you to share with our audience a little bit about yourself. Tell us the work that you do, your aspirations, etc.
Wow. Well, here we go. Clearly, I'm not from the Midwest. I'm just living here right now with my wife and 3 kids when they decide to visit us from their collective or respective areas around the world. But I'm South African, born and bred in South Africa. And then my wife and I have lived and worked in schools around the world, probably about 6 different countries now, I think we were counting. Casey, earlier as we chatted. And so I am passionate about education, but I'm passionate about an education that is authentic for our young children, and also that is an energizing place for our teachers to work in. And that to me has really driven my work across all these decades of working in schools. I've been from a 3rd grade teacher to a 12th grade teacher, a school administrator, and ultimately it's been in the change space that I've worked with the most. And whether it's working in schools in the US, it was in Australia, Norway, Japan, and South Africa, my job has often ended up being the change guy. And I love it. It's hard. I used to have beautiful flowing locks before I started the change work, but it's well worth the effort. What I do now, I've stepped out of working in schools and I work on schools. And I really work in a systems-wide approach. So I will work with leaders and leadership teams to build their capacity to lead effectively. I'll also work with teachers to help them understand where can they tweak and change and transform their work inside classrooms to make their environments more authentic, relevant, and the work more transferable and impactful for these young students. And that's really kind of summarizes my work in schools. I run a leadership accelerator, which is really focused on department chairs and grade level coordinators, anyone who's got someone reporting to them, and helping people in schools really build their leadership capacity. Because of course, they were all awesome teachers. And it's like, oh, well done, Casey, you're a fantastic teacher. Now we're going to make you department chair. And you're like, what the heck? This is a different skill set. And in fact, it's these people, it's the managers in organizations and schools that are responsible for so much of teacher engagement. And if we get them right, build their skill sets up, their self-awareness, and their capacity to lead, we have schools that are more kind of ready to step onto the change train, if you like. So that's what I do around the world.
Okay, that's awesome. So tell our audience, I want you to go ahead and share where people can find you. I typically do that at the end of the episode, but now that you've talked about what you can do for other people, where can they find you?
Sure. You can found me at the pool, like just chilling. No, that is not true. And that's actually not a funny joke because my kids forget that I work from home. They just, oh,
Yeah.
dad's at home. So no,
Uh,
you're not going to find me. You're going to find me on LinkedIn. Check
mhm.
out, I don't know my LinkedIn pages, but it'll be in the show notes. That's the best place to find me. I've got hundreds of articles that are written about leadership and about schools and school transformation. And then also anyone who messages me, I'm pretty quick to message back, and we can connect and find a time to chat.
Yeah. And I can attest to that because that's how we connected in the first place. So actually,
Right.
I watched a session and I can't, this is terrible and don't hold this against me, but I can't even remember what conference it was, a virtual conference that I was watching the replay. And you and a colleague were presenting, and everything that you guys were talking about, it was all about collaborative teams and building cohesion and all of these things. And it just struck me. And so I reached out to you almost immediately and said, hey, I'm listening to this session. I think it would be great for us to do a podcast session together. And almost immediately you said, yeah, let's set up a time to chat.
Yeah, I love a good chat. I love a good chat with an educator who's passionate about what they're doing about making schools a better place for teachers and kids. So I've really enjoyed getting to know you, Casey. So thanks for reaching out.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we talked our first time to visit, we were like, okay, well, what are we going to do this episode on? Right. And then we had no idea. We just started chatting. And as the chat went on, I was just taking some notes, and we got to the end of the chat and I said, oh my gosh, this is what's really standing out about one thing you said is that schools are horribly outdated and we need our learning environments to transform.
Yes.
So what I want to know before we dig into like really what that looks like, what inspired you to focus on transformation in schools, and how, because I know that within the work that you do, you're really thinking about future ready organizations.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
what brought you to that kind of work?
So much, so much. It's hard to even pinpoint a particular event or story. One that's perhaps most clear for me is my son, who's studying music production, Full Sail University, super, not even like post-contemporary university structure. Doesn't look or feel anything like university, which suits him just fine. Did okay in school, but he was pretty disengaged in the classroom, and he wasn't the only one. But what I did notice with him is that two things: one, video games he loved. Sorry, three things: two, his sports. No coach ever had to engage him on the sports field. He loved it. And then third, music. From at a young age, maybe 13, 14, he started to make beats on his phone. And then we got to, we got the Mac out, we got the Garage Band, and bit by bit, he built his own studio and would spend hours and hours and hours in there producing music. He had kiddos from all over the state coming to work with him. He wasn't getting graded on this, Casey. No one was following up with him. No one was holding him accountable. And yet the energy and the precision and the creativity and the effort that he put into this completely outside of school really struck me. And as I started to think more deeply about this and talk to more kiddos, so many kids have kind of like a side hustle. They've got a
Mhm.
passion of some sort that doesn't even feature in a school. And I thought, here these kids come, at the start of a school day, there's a buzz in a school. By the end of the day, that energy is depleted. What are we doing in schools that so disengages our kids? What are we doing in schools that makes our kids be disruptive, that makes them bored, that makes them just not even want to come to school? So that was
Mhm.
a big piece for me. The other one was, why after school, when kids are in band or they're in choir or they're at scouts or on a sports field, why are they not disengaged? Why are they so into what they're doing without a whole lot of effort from their coaches? And again, it's because it's meaningful, it's real, it's authentic to them. It's something that they love to do. So it's just over the years that I've recognized these things happening in schools. And it was particularly, looking at my son and watching him be so disengaged in one area and another area where no one was holding him accountable. He was absolutely flying, and now studying it as a degree. So that's probably the main thing. I think the other thing, Casey, is that our world has changed dramatically. Dramatically. And I remember when I used to run these sessions and workshops for schools around the world, I'd have to kind of show or kind of prove the why. Why has the world
Mhm.
changed? How has it changed? Now I just find I've just got to put like that horrible COVID bug. I don't know how everyone knows what the picture looks like, but we all have this picture of like COVID, and that's all I put up there now because people go, heck yeah, we have lived change. We're realizing it, and now I put that up, and now Chat GPT. It's transformed what we do. Why? Because we can actually see it. Because often when we look out the window, it doesn't look like things have changed much. But actually, beneath our feet, things are changing dramatically. And I think we were chatting, we said if someone goes to sleep and they fell asleep 100 years ago, they woke up now. One thing they would definitely recognize are schools. That's terrible. That shows how
Mhm.
horribly outdated they are, that people, if they went to sleep 100 years ago, could actually recognize these institutions. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it's bubbled up over the years, Casey, to this point where I don't want to just reform schools. I really want to transform them for our young people.
Yeah. Okay, so two things. First, I want to mention there were a couple of things that you said that made me think also about teachers. So, actually I have three things to say. Disengagement in schools where our energy is depleted, our kids' energy is depleted at the end of the day. It's not just the kids, it is also teachers. So
Yes.
that also has to say something, right?
Yes.
Because if I'm witnessing someone fully engaged in something that they're passionate about, that also provides me energy to keep going.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing. I think it's not just kids, it's teachers as well, and it's administrators, and it just goes on down the line. And then I also kind of think sometimes, yeah, I've even said this to my own kids, and I hate that I've said this, but I've talked about how college is that place where you're going to get to figure out what your passion is, and you're going to get to study that thing. That's backwards, right? Like
Mhm.
it shouldn't be something that we have to wait for
Yep.
to be able to explore and get really adequate at, like it shouldn't be something that we wait for, but it is.
Yeah, that's a travesty.
Mhm.
Our schools should be places where kids are being able to study their passion. And not just not, it's the good old passion projects. Those were fine, but passion projects have to go a step further. They have to be passion projects that have kids making an impact on their world. It could be their
Mm,
classroom, it could be their school, it could be their local community, it could be national, global, whatever. But let's start using the time in schools to help students identify what are your natural strengths and talents and really leverage those because that's the area where we move further, faster, and have way more fun. Let's
mhm,
really leverage that. And then how do we take your passions and interests and strengths and make sure that that has a positive impact on humanity? When
right.
we are looking to better humanity through the strengths, passions, and talents of our young people, what a better place this world is going to be. And I would also say, Casey, that I've got three kiddos at university. Tane, my son, is perhaps having an opportunity to study his passion, but he's at a university that sits outside the norm. My other two, that's not been the case. They've got to do a gen ed. So you're going to do a math, you're going to do a science, you're going to do, so when do you study? When do
Right.
you get to lean into your passion? Oh, maybe when I do a post grad. For heaven's sakes, the kid's 22 years old, and by then they don't want to go back to learning anymore because they realize that it's actually not engaging them. So I think even now that's a whole nother podcast. But the college
Yeah.
system really needs to relook at what they're offering to better impact our students in a positive way.
Right. And actually, I think it does have a lot to do with this episode, though, too, because there's a trickle down effect from our collegiate systems. I actually was having a conversation with a colleague the other day, and I'd sent several people this article about standards based grading and let's shift away from the traditional grading system. And
Right.
she said, while I completely agree with what they're saying and I understand their points, it can't really start with us. It has to start with our college systems and the way that they accept students and the way that they grade students, because you can't transition from one thing to another. It's almost like, you have to change your currency from going from one country to another. And so yeah, I think the transformation that you're talking about has to be so it has to go beyond where we are with the public schools
Mhm.
right now. It has to
Mhm.
go beyond that.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And let's hope that's the case. I think one of the biggest challenges is transforming our universities, and when we do that, the flow down effect is going to be quite remarkable, I think. However, that's probably not going to change. That's probably not going to change in our lifetime. So
Mm-hmm.
my work is, all right, we know that this is what it requires to get into college. We know what the colleges are looking like now. So how do we innovate within the system? That's the key thing. And I think that's the role for leaders, Casey, is their role is creating a culture for innovation within a system, because it's a heck of a thing to try and break this whole thing of, system apart. But there
Right.
are opportunities to innovate, and then I think that's where the quality of leadership comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, talk to us a little bit about the difference between, in your mind, between reform and transformation.
Yeah, I was pretty pumped that you picked that up. So thank you for doing that. I think reform, we've been doing something for we've been trying to reform schools for a long time, and you know better than me. You're from the USA, and you can pick any other country where governments have gone through this reform, and probably Finland is the example of what happened when it's done right. And yes, we've all rushed across and tried to copy what Finland's done. There's a whole cultural piece that we can't replicate, and we have to be super aware of. All right,
Mm.
but generally, most of the time, reform doesn't work. We're tinkering with outdated systems, and we've had pockets of success. There's no doubt about it. You can point to it. Superintendents will point to it. Teachers will point to it. We've had pockets of success. Is that equitable? Is
Mm.
that fair for the millions of kiddos who go to school every day, and maybe for a few thousand here and there, reform has made a difference? I think it's like, let's polish the saddle and improve the reins or something, and let's really fix up those wheels of that buggy. The horse and cart has it's no matter what we do with a horse and cart, it's outdated. I think that's where
Mhm.
schools are now, and that's quite natural. Schools were created as they are now for an industrial time. The challenge is we're like in a post industrial era now. We into the third millennium of artificial intelligence, robotics, and all of that good stuff that's coming into to disrupt so much of what we've been used to. But schools haven't shifted. So
Mhm.
reform is tinkering, I believe, with an outdated system. Now and again it works. Most of the time it doesn't. Transformation is radical change. Transformation is to change, the structure, the way it functions. That's what transformation is. And you know what, with that, Casey, it's scary, because when we transform something, we often moving from a known form to an unknown form. And we've got to have compassion for teachers in this space. It's
Right.
scary. I was really good at teaching in this certain way, and now you're asking me to run my class in a completely different way. And so this unknown or not very well known creates some concern, but that's part of that uncertainty, is part and parcel of school transformation. We
Mhm.
are now moving away from a system that no longer works in this time and place, and creating a new system. We're not tinkering. That's transformation.
Yeah. Yeah. What a great definition. And to your point earlier, and to what you do with so many schools, it's really in the hands of leaders to be able to lead well in order for teachers to be able to take on that transformation and to do it successfully.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
totally.
challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The
So,
school leadership piece is critical, as you say.
mhm, yes, 100%. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that in here in just a little bit. But tell a little bit, you've kind of touched on this, but let's talk about the shortcomings of our current educational system that you've seen, and how it maybe hinders students for the challenges of what we're experiencing now in our world as it has changed and as it continues to change.
Yeah. Wow. You're asking huge questions, Casey.
Yeah.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. So the wow, where to start with the outdatedness of schools? They were designed for the factory era, And then we've tinkered with it, and we've altered things, and we've put wheels on desks, and we've put, smart boards instead of chalkboards, uh, little things like that. And over the years, we've shifted things. We've tried to do more PBL, and we've tried to do, maybe let's get the Kagan structures going. And so we've changed a few bits and pieces around schools, but ultimately, we still are so often teaching for the 80s and 90s, even, where knowledge was really important. So the ability to take on board knowledge and then regurgitate it, not apply it, regurgitate it, is still a function of our schools. And so the other pieces around, reading comprehension, I'm not saying that's not important. Of course it's important. It dominates. Math, is it important? Numeracy is important, of course. It just dominates the space. It's what Mark Prensky calls the mess. The maths, English, science and social studies. The content, the acquisition of content, and then the testing for the knowledge of that content dominates our space.
Yeah.
And all that's doing is it's squeezing all the stuff that we need to have in kids: curiosity, creativity, imagination, critical thinking. Those are your 21st century skills. And I feel embarrassed even talking about 21st century skills when it's already, it's 2024. We're a quarter of the way through the century, and we're still talking about we've got to get the 21st century skills right. Come on. 25 classes of kiddos have graduated in that time. And so the challenge there is that we are missing out on the opportunities to give kids the skills around creativity, innovation, collaboration, all of that. They need those, and yet we're still very much focused on the drill and kill. Let's test the heck out of these kids because that's the only way we know that they're going to be okay to move up, and so on. So it's the knowledge acquisition piece is what is largely outdated for me. If I can just put it into one aspect, there's so many others, around the social emotional needs of kiddos, the equity piece, all of that. But let's just stick with that, the knowledge piece right now.
Yeah. It's almost like we are fitting kids into this box, right? Like we have a box, and we're going to take all of these kids, and we're going to put them in this box, and we're going to make sure they stay in the box. And then when it's time for them to go out into something that's not a box, they're just not quite equipped for it.
No, they're not. They're not. Our schools are not preparing kiddos for the complex problem solving that's required here. Our schools are not preparing kids to be able to work side by side with AI. We've got, schools are banning AI. No, we've got to have a symbiotic relationship with AI. Our kids right now, Casey, are the most powerful that kids have ever been. They have all the world's greatest teachers in their pocket. They have all the knowledge they will ever need in their pocket. We don't need more of that. We need opportunities for these kids to learn how to show initiative, how to be an entrepreneur, how to collaborate with AI, how to assess and analyze information. All that's what schools need to be about. I'm not saying let's discount the basics. I'm saying, and we need to unleash these empowered students to make a real difference in our world.
Right. And I think about all of these systems that we have in place right now in schools that, okay, well, here's an aside. I just started reading The Knowledge Gap. Have you read it?
Yes. Love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. And it is pushing back on a lot of what I not even just what I grew up with as a student, but also what I grew up thinking was the appropriate approach as a teacher, right? Because I just didn't know any different. And I truly believe we just don't know any different, but we're not giving people opportunities to know different. What we spend our time and effort on is let's get these assessments crafted. Let's make sure we have all of the rigorous assessments available for students. Let's make sure that we have all of the rigorous worksheets and lessons intact so that the students can accomplish this assessment and we can get data from it. And then we're going to use that data and we're going to create these tiers to put students into and pull them out of the classroom, and we're going to work on these really specific skills so that they can master the assessment, right? So like at no point are we really thinking about what you said earlier. What are the students' strengths? Not strengths skills wise, but what are their strengths as a contributing human to this society? Yep. So it's flawed in so many different ways.
Yeah, it is. And we were talking about it earlier, is that as we go into schools, and I go into so many schools, the disengagement is so low, the energy is so low, both from teachers, from administrators, and from the students. Now, a part of that is, and this is where I've come up with this phrase, an artful approach to teaching and learning. And what I try to help schools do is see how they can reconstruct what they do using this very simple framework. So the framework is about A standing for authenticity. Is this authentic? Like, does this actually happen in the real world? So, for example, when I see a diorama in a school, that makes me really sad, because no scientist ever created a diorama to show off their knowledge or application or whatever. Sure, if it's part of the process, I get it. But is this something that would happen in the real world? That's the A part. And teachers can check that out and go, yeah, what would a scientist do? Even if we just keeping with the disciplines as they are. What would a historian do? I don't know how many historians there are in the world, but anyway, what would someone who was interested in the past see? This is where we start to trip ourselves up a little bit, because I don't know, of all the kids that you've taught over the years, how many have become a historian? Yeah, there you go. Right. Yeah, I would probably say with my lot, 0, unless someone went and taught history. So we get very caught up in, history and all of that, but in fact, very few become historians. But there's a reason why we teach history. We want to look at big themes and big ideas and all of that sort of stuff. So, but the authenticity is important. Does this actually happen in the real world? Is this what a real world person would do? Would a scientist create a diorama? No. But would a scientist create a presentation to convince someone to change a way of doing something? Absolutely. Would they collaborate with an environmentalist, with a writer, with a media expert? Absolutely, they would. The R is relevant. Is this actually relevant to the needs of the kids now? Because if it's not, they're not going to learn a thing. And we think they do, but it's so sad when we realize kids actually haven't learned as much as we think they have. Because, and that's the exhausting part, Casey. So what do we as teachers do? We work harder and harder. We become more charismatic. We put in more bells and whistles. We compete with Sesame Street. We compete with video games. We compete with TikTok. We can't. So let's step out of that silly game and do something different. And the difference is saying, is this relevant to the needs of the kids? Do they need to know this information or this skill right now? And so instead of let me put it this way, we fall into the trap of just in case teaching. Well, just in case. They might need this one day. You guys need to learn the Pythagorean theorem. Right. Got to figure out what this whole Pythagoras thing is about, because you might need it one day. No, you won't. You really probably won't need it one day. You need to know these key battles of World War II, their dates and where they took place. You might need it one day. When? It's basically, Casey, the embarrassed at the dinner table argument. Well, I'll be so embarrassed if my kids don't know some of this information. When have we ever been embarrassed? Everyone just pulls out the phones and quickly Googles it. So the relevance piece, is this relevant to the kids now? You know what? When it's relevant, suddenly the kids are leaning in. I want to learn this. Please teach me. That's when direct instruction is useful. Direct instruction doesn't work unless the person says, please teach me this. So is this relevant to the students? And then the other piece is transferable. Can the kiddos take what they've learned here, and can they apply their knowledge and skills in diverse ways? So if they're learning something about data for our American viewers, okay, thank you, got that. You're thinking, what on earth is he talking about? Gathering this data and the skills of doing that and interpreting it and so on. Now they're going to go and apply this to look at traffic flow around the school because there's an issue and they want to make the school a safer place. So the application is important. That's the transfer. And then the I for the article doesn't make an impact. Can a
Mm,
kid say, you know what, Casey, this wasn't here and now it is, or this was rubbish and now it's better? It's very easy to assess, by the way. So the article piece is something that really helps our schools shift a little from that outdated system. Let's make a few tweaks here while we're trying to transform an entire system.
yeah. Man, that's so impactful. So it really makes me think, wow, can we really do that? I want to go back and do it now in my own class. I just want us to go back and teach. That's it. Like just let me go back to the classroom, but I don't know that I really want to do that, because I feel like, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, I'm at the point where I'm like, I want to make this happen for
Yeah.
kids in more than just my classroom.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging and overwhelming too.
Oh, completely. And
Yeah.
Casey, one of the challenges that we have here is that in this movement, we are asking teachers, and by the way, when I work in independent schools, the parents play a big part in this, and so do
Yes.
the alumni, the people writing the checks to keep the schools moving on and building the pretty, new pretty sports pavilions and what have you. It all
Mhm.
makes a difference. And people are going, well, I'm okay. That school really worked for me.
Yep.
I'm pretty sick. I've got a pretty nice house and I drive a nice car and we go on vacation once a year. We're pretty good. Yeah, it was. It served your need in that time. Times
Mhm.
have changed dramatically. So how do we get teachers to learn a new way of teaching? As you said, it's really hard. So let's put aside the community members and the alumni and so on for those independent schools. We get that, but let's just look at teachers. They have never been taught to teach in any other way than the very traditional form of teaching. So
Right.
that's number one thing. They haven't been taught to do that. Number two, they have never even experienced that. They
Mhm.
probably 99% of the teachers can't even come and say, you know what? I remember I had this fifth grade teacher and we just did integrated studies the whole time. We did project-based learning. We crisscrossed the curriculum. It was unbelievable. We were out of the classroom more than we were in the classroom. I get it. They haven't even seen that. And then
Yeah.
finally, and I know that you and I could go out of control on this one, our teacher education. Our teacher
Mhm.
education system is still educating teachers to teach in a time that is gone.
Yeah.
And we are producing teachers that only know how to teach for a time period that is well past. So
Yeah.
those are some of the challenges. Now we're saying, hey, teachers, this is how we'd like you to teach. I call it teaching for the unknown.
Mhm.
Unknown because I don't really know how to teach in that way, and unknown because we don't really know exactly what it looks like. Why? Because we don't know what the future looks like. We just know it's going to be radically different.
Yeah. So there are two things I want to talk about. Number one, I want you to push back on this phrase that I've heard from several teachers actually before, and that is, well, sometimes things just aren't fun. Like they have to learn how to do this and they have to know that it's not going to be fun, but we just have to. How do you push back on that?
That's a really typical and really sad argument. Like if we
Mhm.
are making that argument as to why kids need to do things, and we're doing that all the time, that really speaks to the quality of curriculum that teachers are being asked to deliver. That's
Mhm.
not a teacher issue. Again, I wrote an article a while ago that got a lot of traction. I think I called it "Teachers, It's Not Your Fault."
Mm.
And we are, as teachers, handed an outdated, dry, dull, boring curriculum. And it's all about getting as much content in there as possible because these kids are going to be tested. And when they're tested, you better hope that their test results are better. And we're not going to ask questions about what's happening at home, what's happening in the community, none of that sort of stuff. We just want to make sure test scores have improved. We don't even do
Mhm.
we know that improving test scores to that point is going to create a kid who can go out there and better humanity.
Right.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen that that data. I doubt it. So it's a really sad argument. Yes, there is a time when we've got to grind it out. When we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to get fit, I remember for some unknown reason I decided I want to run a marathon. I think I was so sad about how unfit I was because I had 3 kids under 3 and everything else. Like, oh, I'm so unfit. What's happening to me? And I signed up for a marathon, which was a dumb idea. But that was a grind. It
Mm-hmm.
was, but it was authentic. I was putting
Yep.
in this work for a reason, something
Right.
that was really tangible and I could see it. Kids
Mm-hmm.
play really hard video games, Casey. There are times where the game they're playing, it's a bit of a grind to get to the next level. Why do they do it? Why?
Yeah.
It's not that kids don't want to do hard stuff. Kids will do hard stuff. Look at them training on a sports field or preparing to put on a musical. It's a
Right.
grind, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a purpose behind the grind. And there's a passion behind the grind. And that purpose and that passion is what says to us, this is horrible, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. So I've been working with a school district who what they're focused mostly on is just aligning their middle school math team of teachers
Okay.
and implementing some common practices around some common language. And one of those is really class discussion. But some of what they're implementing came from this idea of what students are struggling with. And so one of the things that they narrowed down that students struggled with most was their motivation and engagement. And so we kind of listed out what are all of the potential causes or contributing factors to that. And as we categorized those, one of the overarching ideas that teachers had was maybe what we are presenting or the way we're presenting it is not relevant to students. And so that's what led to us creating, like, what are some common instructional practices that we can just implement and practice together so we can make our teaching more relevant for students, more engaging, but then also more joyful for us. But if you don't take a step back and reflect on that and reflect on where is this disengagement coming from, and you don't know to take ownership, or if you haven't practiced that, or you don't have a leader who's encouraging and modeling and teaching that, then your only movement forward is reliant upon what you have experienced in the past.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah. And that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I know. This is the context I know. So I'm going to
Right.
shift back into that. What you're proposing is that you've talking about a school here that's undergoing action research. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's 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 a school that's being bold enough and professional enough and caring enough to the students to hit the pause button and say, what's going on here? What are we
Right.
missing here? And the big piece around engagements, we know when kids are bored, what does John Hattie say? When kids are bored, learning retards.
Yep.
Learning just doesn't pause. Learning slides backwards. So boredom in schools literally kills learning and drags it backwards. So when schools are bold enough and professional enough to hit that pause button and say, what's really happening here? And undergo some action research and go, yeah, it's engagement. And that's hard to look at and say, okay, what's our role in this engagement? And Casey, what happens so often is that teachers just work harder. Like I said earlier, they become more charismatic. There's
Mm.
we're going to high five kids in the start of when they come into the classroom. Not a bad practice. I get it. When they come in, there's going to be this music playing. We're going to decorate the room differently. We're going to group kids differently. All of that is not really going to impact what we really want to impact, and that's student engagement. For a while, it'll make things, it's like when we sit down, have a cup of coffee. Life is really good. Those emails aren't going away.
Right.
Some of the worst advice that people give is just go and have a bubble bath. No, it just delays what I have to do, kind of stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yes, it's lovely. Go and have the bubble bath, go and have your coffee, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, you're not tackling the real piece. And the real piece here, like what those teachers figured out, was student engagement. And student engagement is linked to relevance. What they're
Mm-hmm.
learning in class, they cannot see the relevance in it. And by the way, folks, relevance does not equal, well, it's going to be on the test.
Just about to say it. Yep.
Please no. Please let's stop that as a way of motivating kids to work harder. Those days are gone. This is important to you. Why? Not because I tell you, because you really feel it. Because when you get this stuff, oh, I get how to handle data with more proficiency. Now I can go and solve that problem. That's the just-in-time learning versus the just-in-case learning, which is horribly, horribly outdated and irrelevant for these kiddos.
Yeah. All right, let's shift to thinking about teams, because this show is really all about building cohesive, vision-driven
Let's do
teams.
that.
How does that, because I'm really thinking about that. I'm thinking about that teacher who's like, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to create relevant, engaging lessons with my students, alongside my students. How does a team play a role in that? And how can a team cause someone to be stifled and not move forward?
Sure. Great questions. Okay, first of all, and you know the answer to this one, Casey, great things happen in teams.
Mm-hmm.
You know that. Great things happen in teams. It's not the one individual that changes the world. We like
Right.
to think of it, there's the great hero, they did it. No, they had a team with them, a huge team with them. Even the person who wins the 100-meter race in the Olympics, they have a whole team behind them. It takes a team. A cohesive team means that your team has trust. And trust is critical because we're asking teachers to step into the space of asking themselves difficult questions, like the team you're talking about. Our kids aren't engaged. What the heck's going on here? Let's ask each other some difficult questions. Teams that do not, a group of individuals on a team that don't trust each other will never ask that question. And they
Right.
certainly wouldn't enter into a conversation. So when you're talking about cohesive team, the cohesive team is all around trust. When you've got a foundation of trust, the ability to collaborate, communicate, and take risks improves. So everything happens in a good team. So I'm a big supporter of creating a really strong team environment so that there's a space where teachers can move the needle on education.
And so who is responsible for ensuring that happens, in your opinion?
Well, the leader, for one. And I'm not talking about necessarily about the school principal here. I'm talking about who leads that particular team. It may be the school principal,
Mm-hmm.
but as we said right at the start of the show, the manager, that team leader is responsible for 70% of the engagement of that team. So that whoever the team leader is has a big responsibility. Then I would also say, and I've seen it recently with a team that I've been working with, it requires other people to step up. Any team that members that just step back and go, oh, Casey's the boss here. And so we're just going to step back and let her take the lead here. That's also not going to work, because as much as we love you, Casey, you are not a perfect leader. You have your strengths, you have your blind spots, and you have things that you just don't want to do because you're no good at them. When you start to create a team, people fill those blind spots. They fill those weak areas. They support you where you need to be supported. And so, yes, the team leader takes a lot of the responsibility there. And at the same time, it requires everyone else to lift their game and contribute as well.
Yeah. And Peter, guess what? All of these skills that you're talking about are the skills that people leave school not
I know
having. So just goes to show that transformation in schools is imperative if we want to see this, if we want to see a life-giving, thriving environment in our teams and our professional teams at school.
Yes, 100%. And I was just having this conversation with a school leader just the other day and saying that it's no good just talking about these 21st century skills or these social emotional skills that kids ought to have when they finish school. We have to be intentional about teaching that, because guess what? In the workplace, we need them. We all work on teams, and we need to be able to communicate well, play nicely in the sandbox, share leadership, contribute, be curious, all these cool things that make up a team. But we don't intentionally teach it. And by the way, even assess it so kiddos can see their gradual growth in these important, what we call soft skills. I prefer to call them essential skills.
Mm-hmm.
And until schools start to intentionally teach these essential skills, we have a faith-based system of education. You know, one day when Jimmy leaves this school, we hope that he takes everything that he's learned and he becomes a really good citizen. We being so hopeful about that. Why not teach and assess those skills in context, in schools, so that we're not just hoping one day perhaps Jimmy will be a really good person. We can help Jimmy be a really good person through his school career. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We teach, and so when we teach collaboration, we often teach it, if we do it, some schools do, are we going to do this? They teach it completely out of context. They'll play a few games and that's teaching kids how to be collaborative. No, what happens if kids were working together in an authentic manner on a relevant project that's going to have real impact in their community? In that context, we start to teach these essential skills. That's more likely to stick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many schools, I think, and I actually just got an email from, and I teach about this when I work with teams. One of the first things that we talk about, alongside the school vision and mission and all of the core values and everything, is what is our portrait of a graduate? Like, what do we envision for our graduates when they leave? But what I notice happens is it's like we're trying to play, I hate to say it this way, and this is not the best way to say it, so paraphrase and adjust this however you would like. But we've got two games going on. We've got the game of let's prepare them for life. And yes, this is what I believe, because those portraits of a graduate are crafted with teachers. So teachers are doing the work of creating this based on what they believe should be evident in a graduate, right? But then you also are playing the testing game. Like, okay, yes, I want this, but really I have to make sure that they are ready for this assessment. So, I can see it's like, which ball am I juggling right now? Which plate am I spinning? Because it feels like, even though I don't believe this is true, it feels like we are trying to spin plates without one of them crashing.
Yeah, I agree. So, and that's one of the biggest challenges in schools, is to keep these two plates spinning, right? Now, one of the ideas that I have around this is what I call the golden nugget approach. So yes, it basically means, how do we innovate within this very traditional system? Because we could be the school that steps right outside, high-tech high, big picture learning schools, Montessori schools. They typically have stepped outside of the game of testing and getting into and making kids college prep versus life prep. That's cool. But not, the vast majority of schools, we operating in this very traditional system. So that means until that system starts to break down, I believe over time it will. I do not believe that this system can last for another 100 years, given the dramatic changes that we're seeing in our world. Because what we're doing to kids in schools now, how we're preparing them for a world that has long passed us by. And the rate of change is only increasing. And as that rate of change increases, our schools are getting further and further away from what these kiddos really need. For me, it's a moral imperative. For others, it may be different, but I really feel the need to do that. So to transform schools. So how do we do that? So one of the ways, as I said, Casey, is the golden nugget. And I'll give you an example. So I go into schools and I say, kind of taking the appreciative inquiry approach, tell me about a time when your kids have been most engaged. There's a long pause, typically. And then teachers will most often point to something outside of the traditional and contemporary style of teaching. Well, you know what? Once a week on a Wednesday afternoon for an hour, students are allowed to study whatever they want to study. And they love it. They really look forward to it. Every Tuesday morning, our students collaborate with members of the community, and they do a deep dive into some of the problems that are being faced, and then they come back and they brainstorm and find solutions. They love it. They always look forward to that. There's one where, we have once a week for a couple of hours, we do a little integrated studies project, and the kids just have fun doing a certain project. It's not really for grades or anything, blah, blah, blah. There's all these little nuggets that are already happening in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say to the teachers, imagine if we did more of that. Imagine if that 1 hour a week became 3 hours a week. Imagine if those 2 hours a week became 5 hours a week. That unit, like they might be talking about, oh, we do this really cool unit on the water cycle. The kids love it every year. They're engaged. They look forward to it when they come into my 4th grade class. Okay, what is happening there that's in allowing kids to be so engaged that they're even talking about it in 3rd grade? I'm going to come to, Mr. Dryer's class. We're going to do that. What is it about that? There's another golden nugget. Can we shine that up a little bit and see what we can transfer to some of your other units that you teach? So taking on that appreciative inquiry approach, where we look for those golden nuggets, they are all there. And so that's certainly one approach that I would take in terms of how to innovate within this very traditional system. I have others if you want to hear them, but I think that for me, that's the main one.
Yeah. And imagine what it would be like for teams of teachers coming around those ideas. And as you said, shining it up a little bit, and just hashing it out and digging deep into what is it about that lesson? What is it about this that sparked so much engagement and curiosity? Yeah.
We want kids to be saying, heck yes.
Yeah.
And we want teachers to be saying, heck yes. We don't want kids to be, oh, no. Oh, no. And, we watch that energy, that battery just drain. And by Thursday afternoon, everyone's just scraping their way through to the weekend. How do we keep that battery full? How do we keep the kids with this heck yeah vibe that goes, this energy that goes around them? That's what we're looking for. So when I ask teachers, when did the kids say heck yeah? Talk to me about that moment. Shine it up and let's expand it out. And things start to move.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm just sitting here. I know I'm pausing for a little bit, but it's, you ever have those moments where you're talking about things and just your wheels are turning and you're imagining what it actually looks like in person. And you're imagining those people that you've worked with that man, if they had just an ounce of experience with this, of successful mastery experience with this, how it would change their world and their thinking and the lives of children.
Oh my gosh. And so when we shine those golden nuggets, what we find is that most teachers have experienced that. And I then, part of my change approach is to ask them, what did that feel like? Talk to me about that time. And it's not just a few seconds. We really spend 20, 30 minutes as they unpack what it felt like to be in that state where they're surrounded by a group of kiddos that are just like loving this stuff. There's heck yeahs going on all over the place. And typically they go, it was authentic, relevant, transferable, and impactful. That's why. So we get to them and say, all right. So most teachers have experienced that in some way, shape, or form. Another, and they say, it's like, I've been to that beautiful land and I never want to go back there. That when you get teachers there, that's the thrill of it. That's the thrill of the work that you and I do in school transformation. But that's when it also requires, there's such a key role of the leader. You keep coming back to the leader, and your whole piece is around creating these inspired, cohesive, vision-based teams. The vision for this work, Casey, is often in the mission or vision of the school. Schools were not created to be, we are going to maintain the status quo for the next 100 years and make sure that we test the what you call it out of kids. Right? Schools are, we're going to create innovative, creative young people who are going to change the world. Most schools have that vision. And so when I help leaders go back to that vision and use that to inspire teachers, hey, This is what we said we're going to do with kids. We're going to inspire them to be change agents, to be servant leaders. Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. Where's this happening? Alrighty, not in a lot of places. Well, we are now going to work. We're going to commit to making sure that this is happening on a regular basis in our school. Do you know what? That's not a whole lot of change. That's going back to the core of why the school is, why it actually exists on this planet. So that's a key role for leaders, is to support the change, go back to that essence of why the school exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm already thinking about another podcast episode, because I was about to say, all right, now let's talk about this. But we're going to wrap up. But we're going to do another episode, because here's what I think
so much to talk about.
I know, there's so much. But here's what I think would be really cool. So you talked a lot about artful. Yeah. You say it way better than that. It just rolls off of your tongue. So say that for our audience. Artful. I'm not even going to.
You said I'll say it. Artful. Okay. Artful.
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 That's how this Texan says it. Okay. But I'll work on it. Okay. But because I am also thinking, in my mind, because I work so much with teams and that's my passion. But the teams have to transform before they can go into classrooms and collectively transform learning environments, which means they have to have all of these skills. And when they meet, it has to be artful. There has to be authenticity. There has to be relevance in those collaborative meetings. So how cool would it be to do an episode over that?
There's so much to talk about, and I promise I'm not going to take too much time, but there's something that I call the extraordinary teams. And extraordinary teams are about two things: outstanding results and personal transformation. That's what you're talking about. Yes. When you talk about teams and you write about teams, Casey, you are talking about a place where I can be personally transformed because of the powerful work that we're doing. So let's talk about that. The other thing that you always talk about is you talk about identifying the strengths of teachers. I love that work. And I use the Gallup's Clifton strengths. We create team DNA. We understand who's supporting who, where the gaps in the teams are, what people's talents are, how they can be inspired. All of what you are talking about really matters. And so I would love to talk about that some more.
Okay, let's get it on the books.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to close up this session. Of all of the things that we've talked about, what would you hope our audience takes away from our conversation?
Yeah, what I would love the audience to take away is that you can do this. You can innovate within this very traditional system. That's the one thing that I would say. The other piece I would say is that there's such a wonderful opportunity to build a community with other teachers to do this work. And the third piece is to leaders is support your people who want to do this. Support your people who are recognizing that our world has changed dramatically and that our schools are outdated and they're not serving the needs of our amazing young people. Give them the courage and the opportunity to make that difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, where can our audience find you again? You said LinkedIn.
Just hit me up on LinkedIn. That is easy. I do have a website, but LinkedIn is easy. I will respond quickly. And I would love to hear from so many of you. And
do you hear that madness going on with the dogs?
I do hear a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Well, Peter, thank you for joining me tonight. This was awesome.
Not at all. Thanks for inviting me. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hey there, thanks for joining this episode. I would love for you to do me 3 solid favors before you head out. Number 1, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, share this show. Share it with your like-minded colleagues and friends and those leaders who are eager to build cohesive, vision-driven teams. And finally, connect with me on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with Casey on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Until next time, go off and create teams that leave people feeling inspired, empowered, and eager for more each day.